Marcus Westbrook's hand trembles as he signs the document canceling his tech company's billion-dollar IPO. The airline executive across the table turns ghostly pale, stammering apologies that come 6 hours too late. Marcus glances at his phone. Another text from the hospital about his twin daughters. Before I continue this shocking story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. If you've ever witnessed discrimination or stood up against injustice, hit that like button and subscribe to hear how this powerful father turned a terrible situation into a moment that changed corporate America forever. Now let's dive into what led to this extraordinary moment. The morning sun filtered through custom blinds in Marcus Westbrook's spacious Westchester home, casting golden stripes across the mahogany floor. At 42, Marcus had achieved what most would consider the American dream. His tech company, Nexus Innovation, stood on the precipice of a historic $1 billion IPO after 12 years of relentless work, innovation, and overcoming countless barriers as a black entrepreneur in the overwhelmingly white tech industry. "Daddy, are we really flying first class?" Zora asked, her bright eyes wide with excitement as she bounded into the kitchen with her backpack already secured. "We sure are, sunshine," Marcus replied, adjusting his custom-tailored suit jacket. "First time for everything, right?" Zadie, the quieter of his 7-year-old twins, slid into the kitchen behind her sister. Where Zora radiated confidence, Zadie carried herself with thoughtful reserve. "Will the seats be super big?" she asked, her voice soft but curious. "Big enough to fit both of you in one if you wanted." Marcus winked, though the slight furrow in his brow betrayed his distraction. His phone buzzed for the 12th time that morning. Marcus glanced at the screen. Victoria Chen, his COO and right hand for the past decade. He silenced it momentarily. Today was about balance. Success meant nothing if he couldn't share it with his daughters. He'd made that promise at Amara's graveside 2 years ago, when cancer had taken his wife far too young. "Your mom would be so proud of you two," Marcus said, his voice catching slightly as he poured organic orange juice into travel cups. "And of what we're about to accomplish today." The twins exchanged looks. They'd grown accustomed to these bittersweet moments when their father's thoughts drifted to their mother. Outside, Marcus loaded their luggage into his Tesla Model X. Mr. Patterson from next door was watering his immaculate lawn, as he did every morning at precisely 7:30. The older man nodded stiffly. "Big day for a trip, Westbrook," he called out, his tone friendly enough but his eyes never quite meeting Marcus's. "Taking the girls to New York for our company's IPO," Marcus replied with practiced politeness. "We're going public today." "Well, isn't that something?" Mr. Patterson responded, his eyebrows raising slightly. "Never thought I'd see the day when—" "Well, congratulations." The unfinished sentence hung in the air. "Never thought I'd see the day when a black man from this neighborhood would be running a billion-dollar company." Marcus had heard variations of this subtle surprise throughout his career. His phone vibrated again as the twins climbed into the car. This time, he answered. "Victoria, everything okay?" "Small fires. Nothing we can't handle." Victoria's efficient voice came through. "Wellington Group's underwriters have some last-minute questions about the Q4 projections. I've sent them the updated models, but their lead analyst is being particularly thorough." "Thorough," Marcus repeated, the code word they used for when someone was applying extra scrutiny to their business that competitors didn't seem to face. "I'll be available once we're at 30,000 feet. We're boarding at 10. He ended the call and caught Zadie watching him in the rearview mirror, her eyes thoughtful beyond her years. "Is your big business day gonna be okay, Daddy?" she asked. Marcus softened his expression. "Everything's going to be perfect, Butterfly. I promise you both, this trip is special. We're making history together." The airport was bustling with Monday morning business travelers. Marcus guided his daughters through the priority lane, their first-class tickets granting them expedited service. At the counter, the ticketing agent glanced at their boarding passes, then up at Marcus and the girls, her smile faltering momentarily. "These are first-class tickets," she stated rather than asked, her fingers hovering over her keyboard. "Yes, they are," Marcus confirmed evenly, sliding his identification across the counter. "Westbrook, party of 3. "Of course," she replied, her fingers tapping rapidly. It's just unusual to see children in first class on this route. It's primarily business travelers. Marcus maintained his pleasant expression, a skill honed through countless boardrooms and investor meetings where he was often the only black person present. My daughters are joining me for an important business event. The agent nodded, processing their tickets without further comment, but the brief interaction wasn't lost on Zora, who squeezed her father's hand. As they moved toward security, Marcus reflected on his journey. Born to working-class parents in Baltimore, he'd won a scholarship to MIT, graduated top of his class, and worked 80-hour weeks at tech giants before launching Nexus. Every step had required him to be twice as good to get half as far as his father had drilled into him. Now, he was on the verge of joining the rare ranks of black tech founders taking a company public. On board the aircraft, flight attendant Cameron Walsh monitored the first-class passengers boarding. Her smile remained professionally fixed as she spotted Marcus and the twins. "Welcome aboard," she said, her eyes darting between them and their tickets. "Seats 2A, 2B, and 2C are on your right." Marcus helped the girls settle in, showing them how to adjust their spacious seats and stowing their backpacks. Zora immediately began exploring every button and compartment, while Zadie carefully arranged her books and tablet. "This is awesome!" Zora exclaimed, reclining her seat and then bringing it upright again. "Inside voice, though," Marcus reminded gently, stifling a yawn. He'd been up until 3 preparing for investor questions, and the day had only just begun. As the remaining passengers boarded, Marcus noticed Cameron's interactions with other first-class travelers. Her warm conversation with an older white couple, her cooing over a blonde boy about the twins' age traveling with his father. Her demeanor shifted subtly when attending to the few other passengers of color in the premium cabin. By the time the cabin door closed, Marcus had already received 4 more messages from Victoria and the board. The morning would be consumed with final preparations, but he promised himself he'd put everything away for lunch with the girls once they reached cruising altitude. "Remember our deal," he told the twins as the plane began taxiing. "Daddy has to work for the first part of the flight, but then it's family time before we land. And we get to order anything we want from the menu," Zora added, clearly having researched first-class perks. "Within reason," Marcus laughed, already powering up his laptop. As the plane accelerated down the runway, he silently renewed his promise to Amara. Their daughters would have everything they deserved, including a father who was present despite all his responsibilities. Today would balance the biggest achievement of his career with the most important role of his life, being their dad. 2 hours into the flight, Marcus was deep in conversation via his noise-canceling headphones, reviewing last-minute adjustments to his presentation with Victoria and 3 board members. The Nexus Innovation IPO wasn't just another tech company. Going public, it represented a breakthrough for black entrepreneurship in an industry notorious for its lack of diversity. Every detail had to be flawless. "The Wellington Group's lead underwriter is suggesting we adjust our growth projections for the Asian market," Victoria was saying, her voice clear through the headset. "I've pushed back with our data, but he's insistent." "Send me the numbers again," Marcus replied, his focus absolute. "I want to review them before we land." He was so absorbed in the conversation that he barely noticed Zora tapping his arm. When he glanced up, both twins were standing beside his seat, shifting uncomfortably. "Daddy, we need to use the bathroom," Zora whispered, respecting his work call. Zadie nodded urgently beside her. Marcus muted his microphone. "Okay, sweethearts, the restroom is right up front. I can see it from here, and it's not occupied. Can you two manage while I finish this call? It's really important." "We can do it," Zora assured him with the confidence of a child eager to demonstrate independence. Zadie looked less certain but nodded alongside her sister. "I'll be watching you the whole time," Marcus promised, then unmuted his call as the girls made their way toward the front of the first-class cabin. The restroom light showed vacant, and Zora led the way with Zadie following closely behind. As they reached the door, flight attendant Cameron Walsh stepped into their path. "Where are you two headed?" she asked, her tone notably different from the warm manner she'd used with other passengers. "We need to use the bathroom, please," Zora explained politely. Cameron glanced around the first-class cabin with narrowed eyes. "Are you two supposed to be up here? Where are your parents?" "Our dad is right there." Zora pointed toward Marcus, who was visible but engaged in his call, his back partially turned as he examined figures on his screen. Cameron's lips thinned slightly. "I don't recall seeing you board with him." "We did," Zadie said quietly. "We're in seats 2B and 2C. The flight attendant seemed unconvinced. "The first-class restroom is reserved for first-class passengers only. There's another restroom in the main cabin you can use." Zora's brow furrowed with confusion. "But we are in first class. Our dad bought the tickets." At that moment, another passenger, an older white man, approached, and Cameron immediately stepped aside with a warm smile. "The restroom is available whenever you're ready, Mr. Donovan." Mr. Donovan nodded and entered the restroom, while the twins stood watching, bewildered by the different treatment. "As I said," Cameron continued after he closed the door, "please, use the facilities in the main cabin. It's airline policy." "But that's not fair," Zora protested, her voice rising slightly. "We're first-class passengers, too." Cameron's expression hardened. "I need you to lower your voice. If you continue to be disruptive, I'll have to speak with the captain." Zadie tugged at her sister's sleeve, her eyes beginning to well with tears. "Let's just go to the other one, Zoe." Another flight attendant, Eliza Santos, had been observing the interaction from the galley. She hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with what was unfolding, but didn't intervene. "Is there a problem?" asked a woman seated nearby, Olivia Blake, a marketing executive who had been working on her laptop. "No problem at all," Cameron replied quickly. "I'm just directing these children to the appropriate facilities." Olivia frowned slightly, glancing between Cameron and the twins. Without comment, she subtly angled her phone toward the interaction. "We really need to go," Zadie whispered urgently to her sister, embarrassment and discomfort evident in her expression. With one last frustrated look at Cameron, Zora took her sister's hand. "Come on, Zadie." The twins walked down the aisle toward economy class, feeling the curious stares of passengers as they passed through the curtain dividing the cabins. Zadie kept her head down, while Zora held hers high despite the humiliation burning in her chest. As they waited in line for the economy restroom, a flight attendant serving that section gave them a curious look. "Are you two traveling alone?" "No," Zora answered stiffly. "Our father is in first class, but we weren't allowed to use that bathroom." The attendant raised her eyebrows but made no comment, continuing with her beverage service. When they finally returned to first class, they noticed Cameron chatting amicably with another passenger's child, a young white boy who couldn't have been more than 6, as he exited the first-class restroom. The contrast wasn't lost on Zora, whose fists clenched at her sides. Zadie, always more sensitive to tension, had begun to cry silently, tears sliding down her cheeks as they made their way back to their seats. Marcus, still deep in his call, looked up as the girls returned. His expression immediately shifted from concentration to concern when he saw Zadie's tears and Zora's angry face. "I need to call you back," he said abruptly to the board members, ending the connection without waiting for a response. "What happened? Are you okay?" The twins slid into their seats, and Zora leaned close to whisper the story in her father's ear, her indignation growing with each detail. As she spoke, Marcus's expression transformed from confusion to disbelief, and then to a controlled anger that his daughters had rarely witnessed. Across the aisle, Olivia Blake caught his eye and gave a subtle nod, indicating she had witnessed everything. Cameron, meanwhile, had positioned herself at the far end of the cabin, deliberately avoiding eye contact with the Westbrook family. Marcus took a deep breath, years of corporate navigation having taught him how to handle difficult situations with composure. But this was different. This wasn't about him. It was about his children, and the familiar sting of discrimination now reflected in their young eyes cut deeper than any professional slight he had ever endured. "Stay right here," he told the twins calmly, unbuckling his seatbelt. "Daddy needs to have a conversation." Marcus approached Cameron Walsh with measured steps, his expression composed but resolute. Years in corporate America had taught him to navigate confrontation with strategic precision, especially as a black man who couldn't afford to be labeled angry or aggressive. "Excuse me," he said, his voice calibrated to be firm yet non-threatening. "I'd like to discuss what happened with my daughters." Cameron's smile remained fixed, though her eyes darted briefly toward the call button. "Is there something I can help you with, sir?" "My daughters tell me they were denied access to the first-class restroom and directed to economy, despite our seats being right there." Marcus gestured toward their row. "Could you explain why?" "Oh, there must have been a misunderstanding," Cameron replied smoothly. "The forward lavatory was undergoing maintenance checks." Marcus tilted his head slightly. "That's interesting because my daughters saw other children using it immediately after they were turned away." Cameron's smile tightened. "Perhaps they attempted to use it during the brief inspection period. Safety protocols, you understand." "What do you think was really happening here?" Marcus asked, his gaze steady. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like my black daughters were the only passengers denied access." The flight attendant's cheeks flushed. "Sir, I can assure you that race had absolutely nothing to do with it. We follow strict protocols for all passengers." "Then you wouldn't mind showing me these protocols?" Marcus pressed. Before Cameron could respond, a passenger seated nearby cleared his throat. "Excuse me," said a middle-aged Latino man with salt and pepper hair. "I'm Dr. Benjamin Torres, a civil rights attorney. I observed the entire interaction, and I believe what occurred violates federal anti-discrimination laws governing common carriers." Cameron's expression flickered with momentary panic. "I'll need to get my supervisor," she said, pressing the intercom button. Within moments, Senior Flight Attendant Jackson Reed appeared, his demeanor professionally concerned. Is there an issue I can address?" Marcus explained the situation concisely, noting the different treatment his daughters had received compared to other children in first class. "I see," Reed nodded, though his expression suggested he didn't see at all. "These situations can be complex and perceptions can be misleading. I'm sure Ms. Walsh was following standard procedures. What procedure justifies denying access to my daughters while allowing others immediate entry?" Marcus questioned. "Sometimes our staff must make judgment calls based on cabin flow and passenger needs," Reed offered vaguely. "I'm sorry if there was any confusion." Olivia Blake, who had been quietly observing, stood up from her seat. "There was no confusion," she stated firmly, holding up her phone. "I recorded the whole thing. The only difference between the children who were allowed to use the restroom and those who weren't was their race." Reed's professional veneer cracked slightly. "Ma'am, recording other passengers without consent violates our privacy policy." "I wasn't recording passengers," Olivia clarified. "I was documenting a discriminatory incident by airline staff." "Do you believe Marcus should confront this situation head-on, or find another way to address it?" Comment number 1 if you think he should escalate this immediately, or number 2 if you think he should gather more evidence first. Like and subscribe to see how this father handles a moment every parent fears, when your children face discrimination right before your eyes. Marcus could feel his blood pressure rising, the familiar tightness in his chest that accompanied situations where he had to navigate racial bias while maintaining composure. Throughout his career, he'd encountered countless moments like this. Being mistaken for support staff in his own company, having security called when he viewed high-end real estate, being asked to prove he belonged in exclusive spaces, but seeing it happen to his daughters cut deeper than anything he'd experienced personally. Dr. Torres stepped closer. "May I suggest we document everyone's recollection while it's fresh? As a legal professional, I can tell you that contemporaneous accounts carry significant weight." Reed's expression hardened. "Sir, you're welcome to file a formal complaint through proper channels after we land. But right now, you're creating a disturbance that's making other passengers uncomfortable." "The only thing making people uncomfortable is discrimination happening in plain sight," Marcus responded, his voice still level but carrying an unmistakable gravity. Reed leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Mr. Westbrook, I understand you're upset, but causing a scene won't help anyone. We're about to begin our meal service, and I'd suggest returning to your seat before this escalates unnecessarily." The patronizing tone wasn't lost on Marcus. It was the same one he'd heard in boardrooms when executives suggested his company's success was due to diversity initiatives rather than superior products and strategy. As they spoke, Marcus noticed something concerning. Reed and Cameron had moved toward the galley and appeared to be adjusting entries on a tablet, the electronic flight log. They were already altering the record. Meanwhile, Eliza Santos, the flight attendant who had witnessed the original incident, hovered nearby with a conflicted expression. She caught Marcus's eye briefly before looking away. Marcus turned his attention back to Reed. "I'll return to my seat, but this isn't over. I expect a full incident report filed, with statements from all witnesses." "Of course, sir," Reed replied with artificial courtesy. "We take all customer feedback seriously." As Marcus walked back to his daughters, Dr. Torres discreetly handed him a business card. "Call me when we land," he murmured. "What happened here was textbook discrimination, and you have options." Returning to his seats, Marcus found Zadie curled against her sister, still upset, while Zora maintained a protective arm around her shoulders. The sight broke his heart, his brilliant, beautiful daughters learning a lesson he'd hoped to shield them from for a while longer. "Is it fixed, Daddy?" Zadie asked hopefully. Marcus sat down and took both their hands in his. "Not yet, butterflies, but it will be." His phone buzzed with another message from Victoria. "Investors getting antsy. ETA for final review?" The IPO, a billion-dollar culmination of 12 years of work, scheduled for the moment they landed in New York. Marcus glanced at the message, then at his daughters' faces, and made a decision that would alter the course of everything to come. "Victoria, possible situation developing. Stand by for details," he typed back. Across the aisle, Olivia Blake caught his attention and subtly showed him her screen. Crystal clear footage of Cameron allowing the white child to use the restroom minutes after turning the twins away. Evidence that couldn't be denied or explained away. What no one on the plane realized yet was that Marcus Westbrook wasn't just any passenger. And by the time this flight landed, the airline's discriminatory practices wouldn't just be exposed. They would threaten to bring down one of the biggest IPOs Wall Street had seen this year. The plane began its initial descent toward New York. But for the Westbrook family, the journey was just beginning. The seatbelt sign illuminated with a soft ding as the airplane began its descent into JFK International Airport. Marcus noticed Reed and Cameron whispering near the galley, occasionally glancing in his direction. Their body language spoke volumes: concern, calculation, and the unmistakable appearance of damage control. Marcus had switched his phone to airplane mode, but not before sending Victoria a brief message. "Potential situation developing. May need your PR team on standby." As he tucked his phone away, he noticed Eliza Santos, the flight attendant who had witnessed the incident but hadn't intervened, hovering nearby with a beverage cart. When she reached their row, she leaned slightly closer than necessary while pouring water. "I get off my shift after we land," she murmured, her voice barely audible above the engine noise. "Gate A14, Cameron has 3 complaints for similar incidents in her file. Management buried them." Before Marcus could respond, she straightened and moved on, her professional smile returning as if nothing had happened. Zora, always observant, raised an eyebrow. "What did she say, Dad?" "She gave us some important information," Marcus replied quietly. "Sometimes people want to do the right thing, but are afraid of the consequences." The plane hit a patch of turbulence, and Zadie gripped the armrests, her earlier distress compounded by the bumpy descent. Marcus placed his hand over hers. "It's okay, Butterfly. Just a little rough air." His phone vibrated with an incoming call the moment they touched down. As other passengers began gathering their belongings, Marcus saw Victoria's name flashing on the screen. "Marcus, where are you?" Victoria's voice carried the controlled urgency that had helped them navigate countless crises. "The Wellington Group representatives are already at the venue with their underwriting team. The market's responding positively to pre-opening indicators, and our early investors are expecting the bell ceremony in 90 minutes. Marcus glanced at his daughters, Zadie still quiet and withdrawn, Zora watchful and protective of her sister. The business person in him recognized the critical timing, the years of work culminating in this precise market window. The father, in him, saw his children processing their first stark encounter with discrimination, watching to see how he would respond. "Victoria, we may need to adjust our timeline. There's been an incident on the flight involving my daughters." As he spoke, Jackson Reed approached their seats, his demeanor transformed into exaggerated courtesy. "Mr. Westbrook, I wanted to personally thank you for flying with us today. If there's anything we can do to make your deplaning more comfortable, please don't hesitate to ask." The performance was transparent. Reed had obviously discovered something about Marcus's identity that changed his calculations. Perhaps he'd Googled the name, or another crew member had recognized the CEO of Nexus Innovation. "Thank you," Marcus replied evenly. "I'll be speaking with your corporate office about today's events." Reed's smile tightened. "Of course, we welcome all feedback. I'm sure any misunderstanding can be quickly resolved." As Reed walked away, Dr. Torres appeared in the aisle beside them. "Mr. Westbrook, I couldn't help overhearing. I'd strongly advise documenting everything immediately. Airlines have a pattern of misplacing complaints unless there's outside pressure." Victoria's voice came through the phone, which Marcus had temporarily forgotten. "Marcus, what kind of incident? Do we need legal involvement?" "Possibly," Marcus answered. "I'll call you back in 5 minutes with details." As the seatbelt sign turned off, passengers began standing and retrieving luggage. Olivia Blake stopped beside their row. "I'm sending you the video," she said, showing Marcus her business card displayed on her phone screen. "My contact information is there. What happened to your daughters wasn't okay, and I'm happy to be a witness if needed." Marcus thanked her, aware that Reed was watching these interactions closely from the front of the cabin. As they gathered their belongings, he noticed Cameron and Reed huddled near the cockpit door with a third staff member, examining a tablet and speaking in urgent whispers. Zadie tugged at his sleeve. "Daddy, are we in trouble?" "No, Butterfly. You and Zora did absolutely nothing wrong," Marcus assured her, kneeling to her eye level despite the cramped space. "Sometimes people make unfair decisions based on how others look. It's wrong, and it's not your fault. Like when Mrs. Henderson always picks Avery for line leader even when it's my turn," Zora asked, connecting the dots with her sharp mind. "Something like that," Marcus nodded, his heart heavy that his 7-year-old daughters were already categorizing experiences of bias. As they made their way toward the exit, Marcus's tech-trained mind was running calculations and strategies. He'd built Nexus Innovation by identifying systemic problems and creating elegant solutions. The discrimination his daughters faced wasn't a new problem, but perhaps this was an opportunity to address it on a scale few could. The flight crew had lined up for the typical farewell at the aircraft door. Cameron's smile faltered when the Westbrook family approached. Marcus made deliberate eye contact with each crew member, pausing briefly at Cameron. "My daughters will remember this flight for the rest of their lives," he said, his voice carrying just enough for nearby passengers to hear. "So will I." In the jet bridge, Dr. Torres fell into step beside them. "The video evidence is compelling, but employee testimony would strengthen any case substantially. Your flight attendant friend seemed like she might be willing to break ranks." Marcus nodded. "Gate A14. She gets off shift soon." His phone buzzed again, Victoria calling back. The IPO wait for no one, not even discrimination. Marcus had 90 minutes to make one of the most consequential decisions of his career. Proceed with taking Nexus Innovation public under the shadow of this incident, or take a stand that might jeopardize everything he'd built. As they entered the terminal, he spotted airline staff already waiting, their corporate name tags and forced smiles suggesting they'd been dispatched for damage control. What they didn't realize was that Marcus Westbrook had spent his entire career turning problems into opportunities, and what had happened on this flight wasn't just a problem for his family. It was about to become an existential crisis for an entire corporation. "Girls," he said to the twins as they approached the waiting airline representatives, "watch carefully. This is how change happens." The airline's customer service area bustled with morning activity, but Marcus noticed how quickly he and the twins were ushered to a private desk marked Premium Customer Relations. Patricia Miller, according to her nameplate, greeted them with a practiced smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Mr. Westbrook, welcome to JFK. I understand there was some confusion during your flight today, she began, her voice melodically professional. We want to ensure your experience with us ends on a positive note. Marcus seated the twins in adjacent chairs, giving them tablets to occupy themselves while keeping them within earshot. He'd never sheltered his daughters from reality, believing they should understand both the challenges and privileges of their position in the world. Ms. Miller, what occurred wasn't confusion. It was discrimination, Marcus stated clearly. My daughters were denied access to the first-class restroom while white children were permitted to use it minutes later. Patricia's smile remained fixed as she typed something into her computer. I sincerely apologize for any perception of unfair treatment. According to our preliminary report, there was a brief maintenance check on the forward lavatory, which may have created an unfortunate timing issue. That explanation doesn't align with eyewitness accounts or video evidence, Marcus countered calmly. Patricia's fingers paused over her keyboard. Video? Yes. Another passenger recorded the entire interaction, Marcus confirmed. Additionally, one of your flight attendants, Eliza Santos, has information about similar incidents involving the same crew member. Patricia's professional veneer cracked slightly as she glanced toward a supervisor's office. Mr. Westbrook, we take these matters very seriously. As a gesture of goodwill, I'd like to offer you 3 complimentary round-trip tickets to any destination we serve. Before Marcus could respond, Olivia Blake approached their desk. I've sent you the video, she said to Marcus. I need to catch a connecting flight, but please use it however necessary. What happened wasn't right. Patricia watched this exchange with visible concern. As Olivia departed, Marcus's phone chimed with another call from Victoria. I need to take this, he told Patricia. It's regarding a $1 billion IPO that's scheduled for this morning. As Marcus stepped aside to speak with Victoria, he noticed Patricia immediately pick up her phone, her expression urgent. We have investors waiting, Marcus, Victoria said without preamble. The opening bell ceremony is in 75 minutes. Wellington's team is asking for you specifically. My daughters experienced blatant discrimination on the flight, Marcus explained, keeping his voice low. The airline is already attempting to sweep it under the rug. Victoria went silent for a moment. I understand this is serious, but today's timing is critical. The market conditions are perfect and rescheduling could cost us millions in valuation. I know exactly what's at stake, Marcus replied. Have Lawrence prep the legal team. This may intersect with our IPO in ways we didn't anticipate. As he ended the call, Marcus noticed a man in an expensive suit striding purposefully toward the customer service desk. Behind him followed Patricia and another airline employee. The man's confident bearing and authoritative presence marked him as someone accustomed to solving problems. Mr. Westbrook, he extended his hand. Kenneth Williams, Regional Customer Experience Manager. I understand there was an unfortunate situation during your flight. Marcus shook his hand firmly. My daughters were racially profiled and discriminated against by your staff. A serious allegation. Kenneth nodded gravely. One will investigate thoroughly. I understand you're Marcus Westbrook of Nexus Innovation. Your reputation precedes you. I'm a user of your enterprise software myself. The sudden shift in tone wasn't subtle. Kenneth's entire demeanor had transformed upon confirming Marcus's identity, from generic problem solver to deferential executive. I'd like to personally assure you that this matter will receive my highest attention, Kenneth continued, leading Marcus to a more private area. We value distinguished customers like yourself and can offer immediate compensation while our investigation proceeds. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Distinguished customers shouldn't receive different treatment than any other passengers who experience discrimination. Of course not, Kenneth backpedaled smoothly. I simply meant that we have the authority to resolve this immediately, rather than through standard channels. He lowered his voice. I understand you have an important financial event this morning. We wouldn't want anything to interfere with that. Marcus studied the man carefully. Are you suggesting that my company's IPO should influence how we address what happened to my children? Kenneth's smile tightened. Not at all. I'm merely acknowledging that your time is valuable. Perhaps we could offer premium membership status, additional compensation, and a personal apology from our CEO. As they spoke, Marcus noticed Kenneth subtly signal to a staff member, who immediately began separating other witnesses. Dr. Torres was being directed to a different service desk, and someone was attempting to locate Eliza Santos before she could make contact with Marcus. My daughters are watching how I handle this situation, Marcus said, glancing toward the twins. They're learning whether justice matters only when it's convenient, or if principles are worth standing for regardless of timing. Zora caught his eye and gave him a small, determined nod. Even at 7, she understood the moment's significance. Zadie sat quieter, but her attentive gaze showed she was absorbing everything. Kenneth appeared momentarily disarmed by this perspective. I understand, but surely we can find a resolution that addresses your concerns without unnecessary escalation. What would make this right for you, Mr. Westbrook? Before Marcus could answer, his phone rang again. Victoria, with increasing urgency about the IPO timeline. Simultaneously, he received a text from Dr. Torres. They're isolating witnesses. Classic containment strategy. As Marcus weighed his response, a new figure approached. A tall man with a leather portfolio and the unmistakable bearing of corporate legal counsel. Mr. Westbrook, Kenneth said, his tone shifting yet again. This is Graham Phillips from our legal department. Standard procedure for any incident report. Graham extended his hand with clinical professionalism. Mr. Westbrook, we want to assure you that we're taking your concerns seriously. I understand you have an important financial event this morning. Resolving this through proper channels could take some time, potentially hours or even days, given the need for thorough investigation. The implication was clear. Pursuing this matter would directly impact Marcus's ability to attend his company's IPO. It was a calculated pressure tactic, banking on the assumption that a billion-dollar business opportunity would outweigh a matter of principle. What they didn't understand was that Marcus Westbrook hadn't built a groundbreaking tech company by bending to pressure or taking the path of least resistance. Every innovation Nexus had created began with identifying a problem that powerful. Interests preferred to ignore. Mr. Phillips, Marcus said calmly, I believe you're suggesting that my choices are to accept your token compensation and make my IPO, or pursue justice for my daughters and potentially miss it. Is that correct? Phillips maintained his neutral expression. I'm simply outlining the practical timeline of our investigation process. Marcus checked his watch. Let me be perfectly clear. I'm not interested in compensation or special treatment. I want accountability. My daughters deserve to know that when someone discriminates against them, there are real consequences. Graham exchanged glances with Kenneth. Of course, Mr. Westbrook. But these allegations require substantiation. The process takes time. Time you're hoping I don't have, Marcus observed. His phone buzzed again with another urgent message from Victoria. The Wellington Group executives were getting restless. The IPO wait for no one. What Kenneth, Graham, and the airline's damage control team failed to understand was that Marcus Westbrook hadn't risen from modest beginnings in Baltimore to the pinnacle of the tech industry by backing down from challenges. And they certainly didn't realize that they had just made a critical strategic error. They had underestimated how far a father would go to protect his children's dignity. Gentlemen, Marcus said, his decision crystallizing with perfect clarity. You've just made this about much more than one incident on one flight. The meeting room at Wellington Group's Manhattan headquarters hummed with anticipatory energy. Investment bankers in custom suits checked their watches, while analysts refreshed market projections on their tablets. Victoria Chen stood at the front of the room, her polished presentation failing to mask her growing concern as she checked her phone for the 5th time in as many minutes. Ms. Chen, Richard Hargrove, Wellington's silver-haired CEO, interrupted smoothly. While we appreciate your thoroughness, we really should begin. The market waits for no one. Mr. Westbrook is handling an urgent family matter, Victoria explained with practiced composure. He's on his way from the airport now. Richard's smile remained fixed. but his eyes hardened slightly. Family matters are important, of course, but so is timing when we're talking about $1 billion public offering. Victoria had just opened her mouth to respond when her phone buzzed with an incoming message from Marcus. Taking the girls to Mount Sinai Hospital. Zadie having anxiety attack. Proceed without me if necessary. Victoria's carefully maintained professional expression faltered. In 12 years working together, Marcus had never missed a crucial meeting, let alone one of this magnitude. "Is everything all right?" asked Lawrence Okafor, Nexus Innovations legal counsel, noticing her reaction. Victoria showed him the message discreetly. Lawrence's eyebrows rose, but he nodded, understanding. "Ladies and gentlemen," Victoria addressed the room, "we need to briefly postpone. Mr. Westbrook is dealing with a medical emergency involving his daughter." A murmur of discontent rippled through the assembled executives and investors. Richard Hargrove's expression darkened. "Perhaps we should proceed with the technical aspects of the offering," he suggested, his tone making it less a suggestion than a directive. "Mr. Westbrook can join for the ceremonial aspects when he's available." Meanwhile, in a taxi speeding through Manhattan traffic, Marcus held Zadie's trembling hand as she struggled to breathe normally. What had begun as quiet tears had escalated into a full anxiety attack, with rapid breathing and complaints of chest pain that had alarmed both Marcus and the airline staff enough to call for medical assistance at the gate. "It's okay, Butterfly," Marcus soothed, though his own heart raced with worry. "Just try to breathe with me. Slow and steady." Zora sat on Zadie's other side, uncharacteristically quiet, her young face etched with concern for her twin. "Is she going to be okay, Daddy?" Zora whispered. "She will be," Marcus assured her, meeting his daughter's eyes with conviction. "The doctors will help her feel better." As they pulled up to the emergency entrance, Marcus's phone rang continuously. Victoria, board members, investors, the culmination of years of work hanging in the balance while his daughter struggled in his arms. Would you stand by your child even if it cost you $1 billion opportunity? Comment number 1 if you believe family always comes first, or number 2 if you think Marcus should have delegated his daughter's care to handle business. Like and subscribe to see the powerful choice this father makes that changes everything. In the hospital's pediatric emergency area, doctors quickly attended to Zadie, providing oxygen and monitoring her vitals while a child psychologist spoke gently with her. "Mr. Westbrook," Dr. Patel said after her initial assessment, "your daughter is experiencing an acute stress reaction. Has she recently encountered something traumatic?" Before Marcus could answer, Zadie spoke up, her voice small but clear. "The lady on the plane thought we were lying about being in first class because we're black." Dr. Patel's expression softened with understanding. "I see. And has anything like this happened before?" Zadie and Zora exchanged a look that made Marcus's heart sink, a silent communication between the twins that suggested shared secrets. "Sometimes," Zadie admitted, "at school. A boy told me my braids were weird and I shouldn't sit at his lunch table because I didn't belong there. And Mrs. Henderson always picks white kids to be line leader," Zora added, "even when it's our turn." Marcus felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. He'd had countless conversations with his daughters about their heritage, about black excellence and pride, but he'd never imagined they were already experiencing discrimination without telling him. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked gently. Zadie looked down at her hands. "You're always working so hard, and Mommy always said we have to be brave." The mention of Amara, who had taught the girls to be strong and proud of their identity, brought a lump to Marcus's throat. Had he been so focused on building a legacy for his daughters that he'd missed the battles they were already fighting? His phone vibrated again, Victoria calling for the 12th time. When he finally answered, her voice carried barely controlled panic. "Marcus, Wellington is threatening to withdraw. The market opening window is closing, and Hargrove is suggesting they might reconsider their underwriting position if we delay further." "They can't just withdraw," Marcus replied, stepping into the hallway to speak privately. "The agreements are signed." "Technically, there's a material participation clause," Victoria explained. "If you're not present for the offering, they could argue it affects market confidence." As they spoke, Marcus received an email alert from a financial news service. Airline discrimination allegations could impact Nexus IPO. Somehow, word had already leaked. Marcus, Victoria continued, what exactly happened on that flight? As Marcus explained the situation, he received another notification, this time a message from Dr. Torres with a troubling update. Airline legal team attempting to isolate and pressure witnesses. Also discovered Wellington Group is majority, owner of airline parent company. The pieces suddenly clicked into place. The airline's aggressive damage control, Wellington's pressure to proceed without him, the leaked story. It wasn't just about one discriminatory incident anymore. It was about power and the lengths to which corporations would go to protect themselves from accountability. Victoria, Marcus said, his voice taking on the decisive tone that had guided Nexus through its most challenging innovations. Contact Horizon Capital immediately. Tell them we have a situation and a potential opportunity. Horizon, our biggest competitor to Wellington? Victoria sounded stunned. Marcus, what are you thinking? I'm thinking it's time to disrupt more than just technology, Marcus replied, watching through the doorway as Zora read a story to Zadie, who was beginning to breathe more easily. I need to go. My daughters need me now. The market can wait. As he ended the call, a notification appeared on his phone. The video Olivia had recorded was beginning to circulate on social media. The truth was getting out, despite the airline's efforts to contain it. Marcus returned to his daughter's side, where the hospital psychologist was gently discussing coping strategies with them. For the first time since founding Nexus Innovation, Marcus Westbrook had chosen to step away from a critical business moment. And paradoxically, it might prove to be the most important business decision he'd ever made. The fluorescent lights of Mount Sinai's waiting area cast a harsh glow as Marcus paced, his mind working in the focused, systematic way that had made him a tech visionary. To an outside observer, it might have seemed like the worst possible day for the CEO of Nexus Innovation, his billion-dollar IPO in jeopardy, his daughter in the hospital, and a discrimination case threatening to become a public relations nightmare. But Marcus Westbrook didn't see problems. He saw patterns, systems that could be reconfigured, opportunities hidden within challenges. Mr. Westbrook? Dr. Torres approached, having arrived at the hospital after Marcus's call. I've reviewed the video evidence and spoken with the other passenger, Ms. Blake. The airline's actions constitute clear discrimination under federal transportation regulations. Marcus nodded, gesturing toward a quiet corner where they could speak without being overheard. There's more to this than just one incident. The Wellington Group, which is underwriting our IPO, is the majority shareholder in the airline's parent company. Dr. Torres's eyebrows rose. That creates a significant conflict of interest. They're essentially pressuring you to abandon your discrimination claim to protect their own investment. Exactly, Marcus confirmed. And they're using my company's IPO as leverage. His phone chimed with a message from Victoria. Horizon Capital intrigued. CEO Eleanor Washington wants to speak personally. ASAP. Marcus excused himself to take the call. Eleanor Washington was a legend in investment banking, one of the few black women to head a major financial institution, known for her strategic brilliance and unwavering principles. Marcus, Eleanor's voice came through clear and authoritative. Victoria briefed me. Let's cut to the chase. Wellington is trying to bury a discrimination incident by holding your IPO hostage. That's the situation, Marcus confirmed. Bold of them, Eleanor remarked dryly. Horizon can step in as underwriter with 24 hours notice. We'd need to review your financials immediately, but your company's fundamentals are strong. The question is, are you prepared for the potential fallout? Wellington won't take this lying down. Marcus glanced toward the hospital room where a child psychologist was still speaking with his daughters. I'm prepared for whatever comes. This is about more than business now. I understand completely, Eleanor replied. My team will contact Victoria within the hour. And Marcus, for what it's worth, I think you're making the right call. As he ended the call, Marcus noticed a notification on his phone. Olivia's video of the airline incident had been shared thousands of times in the past hour, with comments flooding in from people who had experienced similar discrimination. Dr. Torres approached again. The airline's legal team has been calling me repeatedly. They're offering an increasingly generous settlement if we agree to confidentiality. They're panicking, Marcus observed. Good. His phone rang again. This time, the twins' school principal, Dr. Janet Wilson. Marcus answered with concern, wondering what new complication had arisen. Mr. Westbrook, I just heard about what happened to the girls, Dr. Wilson began. I wanted to check on them, but also, there's something you should know. What is it? Marcus asked. After hearing about the incident, I reviewed our records of past behavioral reports. There's a pattern I missed before. Several incidents involving the twins where they reported unfair treatment were dismissed without proper investigation. I'm deeply sorry, and we're already implementing new procedures. The revelation confirmed Marcus's growing realization. The discrimination his daughters faced on the plane wasn't an isolated incident, but part of a systemic pattern they'd been navigating silently. As Marcus absorbed this information, Victoria arrived at the hospital, tablet in hand, her usual composed demeanor slightly frayed at the edges. Eleanor's team is ready to move forward, she reported. But there's something else. I've been analyzing the social media response to the video, and it's revealing a pattern of similar incidents with this airline. They've been settling cases quietly for years. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. Run a data analysis. Compare customer complaints against this airline with demographic information where available. Use the same pattern recognition algorithms we developed for our behavioral prediction software. Victoria raised an eyebrow, immediately understanding. You want to establish a statistical pattern of discrimination. Precisely, Marcus confirmed. If what happened to my daughters is part of a systemic issue, we need to document it thoroughly. As Victoria set to work, Marcus received an alert that Wellington Group executives had arrived at the hospital, a bold move that confirmed his suspicions about their desperation. The hospital psychologist emerged from the twins' room. Mr. Westbrook, Zadie is doing much better. The anxiety has subsided and we've had a good talk about coping strategies. She'd like to see you. Inside the room, Zadie sat up in bed, looking smaller than usual in the hospital gown, but with color returned to her cheeks. Zora sat beside her, the two of them working on drawings the psychologist had suggested as a calming activity. Daddy, Zadie said when she saw him. I drew our family being brave. She held up a picture showing 3 stick figures standing tall, with speech bubbles containing the words, "We belong." Marcus felt his chest tighten with emotion. That's beautiful, Butterfly. Are you going to make them say sorry for being mean to us? Zora asked directly, always the more confrontational twin. I'm going to do something even better, Marcus promised. I'm going to make sure they change how they treat everyone. A nurse appeared at the doorway. Mr. Westbrook, there are some executives here insisting on speaking with you. Hospital policy is to check with you first. Marcus squeezed his daughter's hands. I need to take care of something important. Stay with Victoria for a few minutes, okay? In the waiting area, Richard Hargrove and 2 other Wellington executives stood in impeccable suits, looking distinctly out of place among worried families and medical staff. Marcus, Richard began smoothly, extending his hand. Terrible situation. How is your daughter? Recovering, Marcus replied, not taking the offered hand. From an anxiety attack triggered by racial discrimination on an airline your company owns. Richard's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. An unfortunate misunderstanding that's being addressed. Meanwhile, the market waits for no one. We have investors expecting the Nexus IPO today. The IPO will proceed when I'm satisfied that proper accountability measures are in place, Marcus stated firmly. Richard's facade of concern dropped slightly. Marcus, be reasonable. You're risking $1 billion valuation over what amounts to a customer service issue. We can ensure your family receives VIP treatment on any future flights. VIP treatment? Marcus repeated. My daughters don't need special treatment. They need equal treatment, as do all your passengers. Richard stepped closer, lowering his voice. Let's be practical. The offering documents are ready. The investors are waiting. We can resolve this incident separately, with generous compensation. Marcus studied the man before him, powerful, privileged, and completely unable to comprehend why Marcus wouldn't simply take the money and move on. It was the same blindness that allowed discrimination to persist in boardrooms, schools, and yes, airplanes across America. What you fail to understand, Richard, is that this isn't a negotiation. It's a reckoning. As they spoke, Marcus noticed Eleanor Washington entering the hospital waiting area, impeccably dressed and radiating authority. The Wellington executives followed his gaze, and Richard's expression darkened as he recognized Horizon Capital's. So, Marcus's phone buzzed with a message from Victoria. Analysis complete. Found statistically significant pattern of discriminatory treatment across customer complaints. Ready when you need it. Eleanor approached, nodding professionally to the Wellington executives before turning to Marcus. Everything is in place. Whenever you're ready to proceed. Richard Hargrove's face flushed with anger as he realized what was happening. You're making a serious mistake, Marcus. Wellington Group has relationships with every major player in tech finance, and now everyone will know exactly how Wellington Group responds when confronted with documented racial discrimination, Marcus replied calmly. I wonder how your other clients will feel about that. The pieces of Marcus's strategy were falling into place with the elegant precision that had made Nexus Innovation a technological powerhouse. What had begun as a traumatic incident for his daughters was transforming into something much more significant. A moment of accountability that could change corporate practices far beyond one airline or one IPO. As Richard Hargrove sputtered, threats about contract violations and market consequences, Marcus's attention was drawn to his phone, where notifications continued to flood in. The story was spreading, resonating with thousands who had experienced similar discrimination and had their complaints dismissed or buried. Eleanor Washington stepped closer to Marcus. The paperwork is ready. Horizon is prepared to move forward. With the underwriting immediately, with a projected valuation 15% higher than Wellington's offer. Marcus nodded, then turned back to Richard. It seems the market does wait for integrity after all. The conference room at Horizon Capital's Manhattan headquarters buzzed with focused energy as legal teams from multiple organizations worked through revised IPO documentation. Marcus sat at the head of the table, Victoria to his right, and Eleanor, Washington to his left, while the twins worked quietly on tablets in a comfortable seating area nearby. Dr. Torres observed from the corner, occasionally providing legal input on the discrimination aspect of the situation. The revised offering is stronger than Wellington's, Eleanor noted, reviewing the final numbers. Your company's innovative approach to enterprise solutions already had the market excited. Now, with the added element of principled leadership, pre-offering interest has actually increased. Victoria nodded in agreement. Social media sentiment analysis shows overwhelming public support. The story has resonated far beyond the initial incident. Marcus's attention was diverted by a notification on his phone, a news alert indicating that Richard Hargrove and a team from Wellington Group were requesting an urgent meeting. They're here, Marcus stated simply. Eleanor's eyebrow arched slightly. Sooner than expected. They must be feeling the pressure. Within minutes, Richard Hargrove entered with Graham Phillips from the airline's legal team and 2 additional Wellington executives. Their expressions ranged from tightly controlled anger to thinly veiled panic. Marcus, Richard began, ignoring protocol by speaking before being invited to join the meeting. This unnecessary escalation benefits no one. We're prepared to offer significant concessions to move forward with our original agreement. Marcus remained seated, studying Richard with the analytical clarity that had helped him identify market trends others missed. Please take a seat. We're in the middle of finalizing our offering with Horizon Capital, but we can spare a few minutes. Richard's jaw tightened at the dismissive tone, but he complied, signaling his team to do the same. This hasty arrangement with Horizon cannot possibly match our integrated support package. Wellington's global network, Marcus interrupted calmly, includes ownership of an airline with documented patterns of discriminatory practices. Practices your team attempted to cover up when my daughters were affected. Graham Phillips leaned forward. Mr. Westbrook, those are serious allegations without sufficient evidence. Actually, Dr. Torres interjected, sliding a tablet across the table. "We've compiled extensive evidence, statistical analysis of complaint patterns, eyewitness testimonies, video documentation, and internal communications showing deliberate concealment of discrimination claims. It's quite comprehensive." Richard shot Graham a warning look before returning his attention to Marcus. "Isolated incidents within a subsidiary don't reflect Wellington Group's values. We're prepared to implement enhanced sensitivity training across all portfolio companies." "Training is a start," Marcus acknowledged, "but insufficient without accountability and structural change." Victoria passed Marcus a folder containing the latest social media analytics. The public response continues to grow. Major Wellington clients are beginning to ask questions about their own diversity commitments. Richard's expression darkened. "You're turning a minor customer service issue into a media circus. This approach is unprofessional and potentially damaging to both our organizations." Marcus leaned forward, his voice level but carrying unmistakable conviction. "Let me be absolutely clear, Richard. What happened to my daughters wasn't minor, and it wasn't just customer service. It was discrimination, plain and simple. The kind that happens every day to people who don't have the platform or resources I do to hold powerful institutions accountable." He gestured toward the twins, who were watching the exchange with solemn attention. "My daughters are learning how the world responds when they assert their right to equal treatment. What they experienced was traumatic, but what happens next will shape how they view justice and accountability for years to come." Richard's demeanor shifted suddenly, a calculating look replacing his frustration. "Marcus, let's speak candidly. You're clearly upset about your daughter's experience, as any father would be. But are you really willing to jeopardize your company's future by making this personal? Some might see this as playing the race card rather than focusing on business fundamentals." A tense silence fell over the room. Richard had just made a critical tactical error, one that revealed the fundamental disconnect in how he viewed the situation. "Playing the race card?" Marcus repeated, his voice quiet but carrying a weight that commanded the room's attention. "My 7-year-old daughters were denied access to a restroom because of their skin color. That's not a card being played. That's racism being experienced." Eleanor Washington, who had been observing with practiced neutrality, set down her pen with deliberate precision. "Richard, as someone who's navigated Wall Street for 3 decades, let me offer some insight. What you just said reveals exactly why Wellington is the wrong partner for forward-thinking companies like Nexus Innovation." Victoria's tablet chimed with an incoming notification. "We've just received confirmation that 3 major Wellington clients have requested emergency meetings with their account representatives, citing concerns about diversity commitment alignment." Richard's face flushed as the implications became clear. This wasn't just about one IPO anymore. The ripple effects were threatening Wellington's broader client relationships. Marcus studied the Wellington team's body language. The nervousness, the desperation poorly concealed beneath expensive suits and practiced corporate expressions. They had underestimated him from the beginning, assuming that a billion-dollar business opportunity would outweigh his commitment to his daughter's dignity and his own principles. "Here's what's going to happen," Marcus stated with the quiet authority that had built Nexus Innovation from a startup into an industry leader. Nexus will proceed with its IPO through Horizon Capital. The Wellington Group will implement and fund a comprehensive anti-discrimination program across all its subsidiaries, with independent oversight and regular public reporting. He slid a document across the table, a detailed proposal Victoria had prepared while Zadie was being treated. Additionally, the airline will implement these specific policy changes, discipline the employees involved in today's incident, and create a passenger bill of rights with clear anti-discrimination provisions. Richard began to protest, but Marcus continued without allowing interruption. "These aren't requests or negotiations. They're prerequisites for avoiding a very public legal battle that would reveal exactly how your organization responds to documented racial discrimination." Graham Phillips scanned the document, his legal training allowing him to quickly assess the seriousness of their position. "These terms are extensive. They're necessary," Marcus corrected, "and they're non-negotiable." Richard looked from Marcus to Eleanor, finally comprehending the completeness of his defeat. Wellington wasn't just losing an underwriting opportunity. They were facing a fundamental challenge to their corporate practices. "You've made your point," Richard conceded, his voice tight. "We'll need time to review these demands with our full executive team." "Take all the time you need," Marcus replied. "But understand that our story goes public in its entirety if we don't have your signed agreement by morning. Every detail, every attempt to cover it up, every pressure tactic your team employed." As the Wellington executives gathered their materials to leave, Marcus turned his attention back to his daughters, who had been watching the entire exchange with wide eyes. "Did you win, Daddy?" Zora asked as he approached them. Marcus knelt to their level, meeting their gazes. "We all won, sunshine. Sometimes standing up for what's right is difficult and scary, but it's always worth it." Zadie, looking much recovered from her earlier distress, offered a small smile. "Mom would be proud of us, right?" "Incredibly proud," Marcus assured her, gathering both girls into a gentle embrace. "Of both of you for your courage, and of what we accomplished together today." As the Wellington team departed, Eleanor approached Marcus with quiet admiration. "That," she stated simply, "was masterful. You didn't just change the terms of your IPO. You might have just changed how an entire corporation approaches diversity and discrimination." Marcus watched his daughters return to their tablets, their resilience astounding him yet again. "Some investments," he replied, "yield returns far beyond their market value." 3 months after what financial media had dubbed the Westbrook Ultimatum, Marcus stood on the balcony of the New York Stock Exchange, the traditional bell in his hand. Beside him stood Zora and Zadie, dressed in matching navy blue dresses, their faces beaming with excitement and pride. Victoria Chen and the executive team of Nexus Innovation flanked them, along with Eleanor Washington representing Horizon Capital. The floor below buzzed with unprecedented energy. Nexus Innovation's public offering had generated the kind of anticipation usually reserved for consumer tech giants, not enterprise software companies. But this wasn't just any IPO. 10 seconds to opening bell, announced the NYSE official. Marcus knelt between his daughters. "Together," he said, placing their hands alongside his on the bell. As the bell rang, cheers erupted across the trading floor. Nexus Innovation's opening share price immediately jumped 30% above the offering price, a remarkable vote of confidence from the market. "We did it, Daddy," Zora exclaimed, her natural confidence shining through. "You sure did," Eleanor confirmed, showing them the initial trading figures on her tablet. "Your father's company is now officially valued at over $1.5 billion. But the true value of what had transpired over the past 3 months extended far beyond market capitalization. Following the standoff with Wellington Group, Marcus had established the Westbrook Foundation for Corporate Accountability and Racial Equity, dedicating 5% of his personal equity in Nexus to fund its work. The airline had implemented comprehensive anti-discrimination training and policy changes under a consent agreement with quarterly public reporting requirements. Cameron Walsh and Jackson Reed had faced appropriate consequences for their actions, while Eliza Santos, who had provided crucial testimony, had been promoted to lead a new passenger advocacy office focused on equitable treatment. Most significantly, the incident had triggered a broader examination of corporate practices across industries. Business publications had dubbed it the Westbrook Standard, a new benchmark for how companies were expected to respond to discrimination within their organizations. "Mr. Westbrook," a CNBC reporter called out as the family left the trading floor, "your company's valuation has exceeded all projections. What do you attribute that success to?" Marcus considered the question carefully, aware that his daughters were listening. "We built a company that creates exceptional technology, but we've demonstrated something equally important, that principles and profits aren't mutually exclusive. In fact, they're increasingly inseparable in today's market." Later that afternoon, away from the cameras and celebration, Marcus took the twins to visit Amara's grave in a quiet cemetery just outside the city. They placed fresh flowers beside the headstone, and Marcus watched as the girls told their mother about everything that had happened. "Mom," Zadie said softly to the headstone. I was really scared when that lady wouldn't let us use the bathroom. But Daddy showed us how to be brave, just like you always said. And we made them change things. For everyone, Zora added proudly, not just for us. Marcus placed his hands gently on his daughter's shoulders, feeling a profound mixture of grief and gratitude. Grief that Amara wasn't here to see the remarkable young women their daughters were becoming, and gratitude for the values she had helped instill in them during her too short life. That evening, as they prepared to return home, Marcus received an unexpected call from the White House. The president was establishing a new commission on corporate accountability in diversity practices and wanted Marcus to serve as its inaugural chair. What do you think, girls? Marcus asked after explaining the invitation. It would mean more work, but also more opportunity to create change. You should do it, Daddy, Zadie said with newfound confidence. People will listen to you. The following week, as life began returning to a new normal, Marcus sat in the kitchen helping the twins with homework when Zadie looked up suddenly. Daddy, remember when you said we were making history together on the day of the airplane? Marcus nodded. I remember. I think we really did make history, she said thoughtfully. Not the kind in books maybe, but the kind that changes things. The most important kind, Marcus agreed. 1 month later, the twins released their co-authored children's book, We Belong Everywhere, telling their story in age-appropriate terms to help other children navigate and stand up to discrimination. It quickly became a bestseller and was being adopted by school districts nationwide. 6 months after the incident, the family took another flight, this time to receive a humanitarian award in California. As they boarded, Zadie, who had once been traumatized by the discrimination she faced, walked confidently down the aisle, her head held high. Welcome aboard, greeted a flight attendant wearing a new badge that read, Equity Advocate, one of the policy changes implemented across the airline industry following the Westbrook case. As the plane took off, Marcus watched his daughters, chatting animatedly about their upcoming presentation at the award ceremony. What had begun as a traumatic incident had transformed into a catalyst for change that extended far beyond one flight, one company, or even one industry. Some might have seen it as just another corporate diversity initiative, but Marcus knew better. He had witnessed firsthand how standing firm on principles could ripple outward, creating circles of transformation that continued long after the initial stone was cast into the waters. Do you think anything like that will happen again? Zora asked suddenly, as if reading his thoughts. Probably, Marcus answered honestly. Change doesn't happen overnight, but next time, you'll be even more prepared, and so will the world. As the plane reached cruising altitude, Marcus realized that the most valuable legacy he could leave his daughters wasn't measured in stock prices or billion-dollar valuations. It was teaching them that their dignity was non-negotiable, that systems could be changed when people refused to accept injustice, and that sometimes the most powerful business decision was simply being true to your principles, regardless of the cost. The true IPO, the real initial public offering, hadn't been Nexus Innovation going to market. It had been one father standing firmly for his daughter's right to equal treatment, and in doing so, offering the public a new vision of what corporate accountability could look like. Have you ever witnessed discrimination and wished you could make a real difference? What would you have done in Marcus's position? Comment below with your thoughts and experiences. If this story moved you or made you think differently about standing up for what's right, please hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful stories about everyday heroes making extraordinary changes. Share this with someone who needs to be reminded that one person really can transform systems when they refuse to compromise their principles. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Remember, we all have the power to create the Westbrook standard in our own lives. This story reminds us that true leadership isn't measured by financial success alone, but by the courage to stand for what's right, even when it's costly. Marcus demonstrated that integrity and business success aren't mutually exclusive. In fact, principled leadership can enhance value. We learn that discrimination persists not just through active prejudice, but through the silent complicity of bystanders and systems designed to protect institutional interests over individual dignity. The twins teach us that children absorb unfair treatment deeply, often suffering silently to protect adults they love. Most importantly, this story shows that meaningful change requires both personal courage and strategic action. Emotional reactions alone won't transform systems, but neither will calculated strategies without moral conviction. Real transformation happens when we refuse to accept injustice as the price of success.